Charleroi was once the primary hub for coal and steel in Western Europe. One of the most legendary industrial sites was the Steelworks of Forges-la-Providence. Having been a focal point of the Industrial Revolution in Western Europe, it now lays abandoned and awaits demolition. In this episode, we'll take a deep dive into the hidden past of how this legendary steelworks ended up in this state of decay. The wasteland we are exploring today covers 50 hectares in total. In the past, the entire terrain was completely occupied by various buildings. Today, only parts remain. We'll begin with the oldest remaining section, hidden in the middle of this desolate wasteland. We are now walking towards the remnants of the former coal mine. Coal, in addition to iron, was one of the main components in steel production. It was mined on site until 1978, and only a small part of the coal mine remains. From an old hall, we venture into a true industrial gem. Nature is slowly reclaiming the industrial structure that has stood for over a century. A rail is also still visible. Currently, we are in a machine hall. These red machines are compressors, used for compressing air. This compressed air was then pumped to depths of over 700 meters to provide oxygen for the miners. As we enjoy this incredible industrial gem, let's delve into the history. To understand its origins, we need to go back to Birmingham, England. In 1776, a man named Thomas Bonehill was born right at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. He chose to become an engineer. At the beginning of the 1800s, he was sent to Belgium to offer advice to the rapidly developing industrial economy of Wallonia. Bonehill recognized the potential in coal-rich Belgium. In 1938, decided to establish a steelworks on the outskirts of Charleroi, establishing Forges-la-Providence. The machine hall boasts an impressive amount of old-school steam engines, some over a century old. However, the hall was rather dangerous. We had to navigate via narrow beams, due to the lack of steel panels. Underneath there was murky water, which was definitely best avoided. In fact, coal was one of the earliest industrial activities in Belgium, and served as a catalyst for the Industrial Revolution, eventually propelling Belgium to become one of the richest nations in the world. Ironically, the coal industry was also the first to reveal the initial cracks in the industrial economy of this area. For the next part, we begin with the first steel-related components. This is the coke plant of the steelworks. Coke, which is distilled coal, played a vital role in the steel production process. Nature has now reclaimed the factory, creating a post-apocalyptic-like landscape. Coke is produced at high temperatures, reaching up to 1100 degrees Celsius. When La Providence was established, it rapidly grew from a small factory to a massive complex, complete with its own blast furnaces, rolling mills and forges. The company was listed as one of the largest in all of Belgium. Around the end of the 1800s, more complexes were even opened in France and Ukraine. expanding the company's empire across the whole of Europe. This period can be regarded as the zenith of this company's industrial glory. Innovations like the well-known and still used I-beam were born on this exact terrain. Charleroi quickly became one of the wealthiest regions in all of Europe, attracting many people seeking employment in the factories. What you're seeing right now are the vertical ovens where cokes were once produced. In the past, coal was loaded from the top into the ovens. When finished, they were pushed out by a large train-like vehicle. After being pushed out, the hot cokes were rapidly cooled with water in a large cooling tower. Above the ovens, a lot of vegetation has taken root. Coal is fertile ground for plants. And often when these structures are abandoned, plants start growing on them within just a year. This coke plant was closed in 2008, explaining its current appearance. Coke factories are known for being one of the dirtiest production processes in the world. And this factory is no exception. It's one of the most polluted parts of the site. Toxic chemicals such as ammonia were also byproducts, treated in a chemical plant nearby. As we ventured through the jungle-like area, we first encountered a large machine hall. This hall houses the motors extracting toxic gases from the coke ovens. The two old machines are still in place. In 1938, the old coke plant, dating back to the 1800s, was retired and replaced by its current structure we are in right now. Being from 1938, it makes it one of the oldest remaining coke plants in all of Western Europe. We arrived at the ammonia section of the chemical plant. Ammonia and other miscellaneous chemicals had spilled on the ground, making it a less than ideal place to explore. A wooden pallet serves as an example of the effects of these toxic chemicals. The blue substance completely eroded this wooden pallet. We will continue further. With significant industrial growth came stronger labor unions, creating a social peak for the city. Employees received a good living wage, well above the standards in Belgium. At its height, thousands of people worked there, and they all began their day in this locker room. Today they are all gone, and the once lively locker room stands empty and desolate. So what happened to cause such a grand decline? We will answer this question soon, but first we'll head over to the last and most impressive remnant of the site, the power plant. Like the coke plant, this power plant was also built in 1938. Via a small hole, we entered the power plant. Once inside, we made our way up. These are the large steam boilers. These impressive steel giants once burned blast furnace gas and coke oven gas, which were byproducts of steel production. This is why there are so many pipes surrounding the boilers. Rust has now taken over these once powerful boilers. After World War II, the site consisted of a total of 5 blast furnaces, and the entire terrain was mostly filled with buildings. The last significant investment was made in 1965 with a brand new blast furnace. In 1966, La Providence was taken over by the Liège-based company Cockerill. After this, the decline began shortly after. In 1972, the energy crisis hit the Western world, causing a sudden decrease in the demand for steel. Steel mills in Europe, which had experienced continuous growth since 1945, were now facing challenges. Combining this with the fact that the complex was located inland rather than near the sea made it extremely tough to compete. We continued our exploration, and in these older power plants the filter area often presented surprisingly beautiful scenes. Large windows allowed light to shine on the extensive tubes of the filters, providing a truly impressive sight of this historical industrial beauty. Plants were now growing on the rusting machinery. In the 1980s, Cockerill Sambre owned all of the steel companies in Wallonia. With this extensive portfolio of former independent complexes, restructuring was needed to make them profitable again. In 1982, a restructuring plan was announced, leading to massive layoffs. The La Providence site lost all sections except for the most recently added blast furnace, the coke plant and the power plant. The steelworkers took a stance and 7,000 employees headed to the Belgian capital of Brussels to protest. They were fighting one last time for their livelihoods and their workplace, which some had dedicated their lives to for generations. Unfortunately, the protest turned into a clash between the Brussels police department and the workers, resulting in many injuries. In the end, it led to no resolution and many employees were let go. The once mighty steel factory was reduced to a mere shell of its former self. For the last part, we are heading to the Turbine Hall of the power plant. As we entered the hall, we heard a mechanical sound resonating within the desolate space. We quickly realized it was coming from some sort of generator. We were somewhat apprehensive, but we decided to continue our exploration. This impressive control room has been remarkably well preserved. As you can see, panels filled with various buttons and meters, which once controlled the generation of electricity. Control rooms are always fascinating to behold, though they have become a dying sight nowadays. Large, impressive control rooms like these are no longer necessary due to the use of computers. Suddenly we heard a loud noise and the generator shut down. We exited the control room and noticed smoke coming from the area where we had heard the copper thieves.
Het zit er helemaal blauw van de rook daar.
After a significant restructuring, the site received minimal further investment. And even when parts were still operational, they began to decay. In 1995, the last blast furnace was closed down. leaving only the coking plant and the power plant still in operation. These parts were eventually combined with another steel site neighboring to this one, which still had one blast furnace to create a functioning but scaled down production line. The final blow for the complex came in 2008 due to the financial global crisis. After this, the last 1,000 employees were all let go. Two years after our encounter with the copper thieves, we came back. Our first stop was the area that the thieves had targeted, which was the substation located behind the control room. It was evident that this place had seen better days. It had been ransacked and heavily stripped, likely by the same copper thieves who had been active on the day we were there. The power plant had already undergone partial demolition, but the turbine hall remained intact. A total of 7 machines were housed here, although not all of them were turbines. The one you can see here is a so-called blower, used to create hot air for the steelwork. A variety of turbines and blowers, spanning different brands, were scattered. It's almost like a cathedral of power. In a way, it can be viewed as a fallen empire. Once a place where people from afar came to seek a better life. Where innovation thrived and vast wealth was created. Today it stands as what many regard as an eyesore, offering a rare glimpse into the end of an era that lasted for over 200 years. Demolition work continues throughout the site, with plans to demolish this part in 2024. To conclude the story, we are heading to the lone cooling tower that is part of the power plant. The ladder had been cut off, so we had to improvise. We made our way up into the large concrete structure using small wooden beams. We finally arrived in this impressive place. The decline in the steel industry coincided with the decline of Charleroi. As the heavy industry collapsed, the city transformed from a modern exemplar for the rest of Europe into a decaying outcast. However, things are changing. New development projects are well on the way, aiming to reinvent the city's once industrial identity into something new, ready for the future. In a couple of weeks, we'll explore yet another incredible piece of industrial history. The abandoned steel site of The Martinel.